Hey everyone, it's David. Just a quick heads up, my audio quality is pretty bad this episode. I have equipment coming that will fix it, but you might not hear it for the next few episodes. Anyway, here it is. Enjoy the show.
I wonder why we have panic disorders as adults. Like, well, one of the fundamental books we read as a child had read to us as a child was Where the Red Fern Grows, which is a book about making friends with a pair of dogs and then watching them die.
Yeah, having to kill one because it fought a raccoon that it contracted rabies from. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, and then watching the other one die of a broken heart. What a brutal children's book. And you wonder why, like, generations of Americans are like so fucked up. And it's like, I don't know. They had like Old Yeller and Where the Red Fern Grows. They just had books about pet dying.
Yeah, think about Call of the Wild, man.
Yeah, Called
Not
Wild.
Call of the Wild, man, because that's a messed up Turtle Man or whatever the hell. Did you ever watch that?
Called Wild, no.
It was he was called. I want to say he was called Turtle Man, and he was this Okie that like went and exterminated things for people that they didn't want on their property. And his catchphrase was "Call the Wild, man." I can't do it right now because I'm. Yeah, look it up one of these times, Dave, if you want something that'll haunt your psyche for at least 48 hours.
Wait, like, not like the Jack London story about a man and his dog?
No, I was making reference to that, but when I said, Call of
Hmm.
the Wild, man, that made me think of that show because that's what he said.
Hmm.
He would
I don't
shout
know
out,
that.
"Call the Wild." No, Jack London, awesome story, but even that was like problematic as hell.
Oh, yeah, Jack London is one of those guys who, when you look in at his, let his politics, like, as person, let's see, I have him pulled up right now because I was just, this is so funny because I was actually just recently reading him, because he was a huge prick. Oh, it was in reference to, Jack Johnson being the, like, first, like, black, like, weight champion. Um, Jack London ended up going and convincing this old white guy to come out of retirement and fight Jack Johnson. He big, great white hope, like proprietor of oh no, we need to get a white person to win the heavyweight crown again. And when this old fat white guy eventually lost, because of course he did, because he's fighting a man who's at like the peak of his athletic career, there were like massive race riots across the country in like major cities and small towns. It was a buck wild time, and this is like, geez, this is like the 1920s, I want to say, something like that. So Jack
Sounds
London
about
is
right.
like, yeah, Jack London was kind of a massive prick, for a dude who, thought of himself as a thinker. He was a prominent atheist. He was like nominally a socialist as well. Which, to be fair, just about everyone at the turn of the century America was before they all got, suppressed and murdered. It's very funny.
Yeah,
George Orwell called him out as like, I don't think you're actually socialist, dude. I think you're actually pretty fascist.
that makes me think of like the critique that not all, but quite a few of the right-leaning folks nowadays, right? And they're afraid that we're gonna it's a culture war and we're gonna take them out and they're gonna how will they ever make it when the only actual like historic example of like political affiliation causing you like a death sentence was during the McCarthy era. Like,
Right, right. Like when we like when we killed the Rosenbergs on pretty like flimsy evidence of them like leaking secrets to the Soviet Union.
yeah, being communist. Look what the wonderful psychopath that's being, tried right now did. Like, and it would be completely not that I'm asking for that, but it would be completely unheard of to even for a contingent of folks. I mean, they can't even critique that was bad, that was not good.
No, it's one of those things where you have to do the thing where you have to call yourself progressive because you can't say the S word. You certainly can't say the C word in America.
I like the idea of progressive though. Like the thing that scares me of like locking into a title like communist or socialist or capitalist is that's not that progressive isn't a title, but those are snapshots of an ideology that's very vast on any one of those fronts, right? There's tons of different perspectives on
Mhm.
how to get to where you're going in each one of those. And that's why I like the idea of a progressive is that it's not necessarily, in my opinion, it seems to me that it doesn't hold on to any one architecture. It tends to lead in a certain trajectory, but it doesn't like the dialectical isn't there of like I am this
Mhm.
because I am not that. Progressive is more like,
Mhm.
is that full of shit or is that good? Does this benefit
Yeah.
people or does this cause harm?
Yeah, it's
You know?
less of a dogmatic title because it's very funny when there was actually this Tucker Carlson clip where he said, the left in the United States is one of the best organized political machines that you're going to find anywhere, and it was just laughable because if you've ever hung out with any leftist, the favorite pastime of every leftist is fighting with leftists. With the other ones, arguing about like really dogmatic, like you said, dialectical, just bullshit. It's like you come across these circles, everyone's talking like you have, tankies who are very like Leninist. You have die in the world Marxist. You have like workers of the world, rise up, like Trotskyists, and then you come across like a Georgist uh, who is just like, I think state capitalism could solve things. Um, and then you're like, what are you even talking about? And then the Georgist always gets laughed out of the reading circle. But there's so many goofballs involved who tout an ideology because you get the feeling like you said, it's more based in dialects. It's almost contrarian more than anything else than an actual like philosophy of maybe we can introduce this in society and make things better somewhat. Hysterical that oh yeah, they're so well organized. Like, bro, they are not well organized whatsoever. That's why there's only a handful of like elected officials that did nominally call themselves even progressive.
Well, and but that right, that is the culture of it. I was telling, you're talking to, I want to say it was my uncle about that conservative guy, right? And
Hmm.
they fall in line. It, it's not as much of that right now with what's going on, but normally speaking, they fall in line. Even if they don't like
Hmm.
XYZ, they they fall in line a hell of a lot more willingly than folks on the left. And it's because they're for that, big W win, to hell with the snowflakes, etc. It's like a team type thing, which is unfortunately what we were forced to do when we
Hmm.
were made to vote for Hillary as opposed to Bernie Sanders, when we were made to toe the line, which was horrendous. When we were made to vote for Biden because that's what the other team did, and in order to get the win,
Yeah.
you have to play by the rules of the game. Well, then you realize that the game itself is rigged because what kind of nonsensical shit is that? Like, but the left historically, go ahead, Dave.
Oh no, I was going to say it's one of the massive pitfalls of the two party system, which is only one party better than a one party system. It's certainly not democratic, or certainly not as democratic as we like to pretend it is. It just when you have an electorate who has to sort of fall in line because they do. And I was going to say that things might be a little more different now vis-a-vis like conservative like party politics in America because with McCarthy recently getting voted out of the speakership is like there's kind of no one in charge of the party now of the GOP because typically or at least how Dems have operated. Are a really big like seniority, like organized like institution, which is like people go in there and they put in their like decades of like service or whatever in the hopes of like maybe eventually getting like a speakership or like a whip position in Congress or something like that. And Pelosi had just about the same majority margin as McCarthy when he was speaker, and there was never this kind of vote to like push her out or put her out of business. Largely because of the Dem Party will sort of keep people in line behind what the party wants to have happen in a really deeply democratic way, like you mentioned, like we saw with the primary, where the party largely stacked the deck against Sanders through the superdelegate system, which was the party's going to nominate who the party wants to nominate. They're not really going to listen to the primary votes or anything like that. But yeah, like I think the first like real fracture that we've seen in the GO is coming with McCarthy getting the boot out of the speakership, because I kind of thought that shit was going to happen when Trump was running in like one nomination, or actually, to be fair, in 2016, I thought Trump was going to lose the nomination. I didn't think he would get it, and I thought he was going to run independent and fracture the conservative vote. That, of course, did not happen, right? I greatly underestimated how many people were going to resonate with his racism and fall in line. But yeah, no, it is very funny that the current Conservative Party has typically been the more organized, culture war oriented party in the United States. And shit, man, I actually have no clue what's going to happen next, because McCarthy getting it was one of those things where it's like, oh, didn't see this coming at all.
Is it super surprising though when you have a party that is beholden to, or I shouldn't say the whole party. The whole party is beholden to the privilege and the wealth accumulation that it seeks to maintain. But
right, they're all
the people,
every conservative voter is just a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, that kind of thing.
kind of, even if you're poor as shit, you could eventually become a millionaire. At least that's the illusion, right? But with the psychopath that they elected, everybody, like you said, they were falling in line. But the thing of it is that guy, even by just mainstream media, which is problematic at best, he doesn't have a stellar track record for hiring people or inspiring a culture of excellence. So
No.
the people that came out of the woodwork that materialized, like your Boberts and your Greens, Stephen Miller, Gates,
Right.
Steve Bannon, like all these people have been able to they're not Jim Jones,
Jeffries.
that what's his name? The wrestling guy?
Jeffries? Jim Jeffries?
Is that his last name? Is Jeffries?
I think so. I'm Googling it right now. Oh shit, Jeffries is a comedian. Oops, not the same guy whatsoever. Jim Jeffries is actually a very funny comedian.
I want to say Jim Jones is his name, but that makes me think of like the Jonestown stuff.
I know Steve Scalise is in running for the speakership right now, and he's that fucking goofball who nearly got assassinated. He was practicing for the congressional office, and he got shot. Someone rolled up, tried to shoot him, shot him in the hip, and he famously came back and was like, "No, I think guns are still good. Actually, I'm still a pro-gun voter. Rights more than human rights. Blah blah blah." Yeah, but I mean, what else can you expect from a GOP representative from Louisiana of all places? Yeah, I'm looking right now to see who it's Jim something or other. You're right. The name is escape. But yeah, it's the guy who was that wrestling coach who turned a blind eye to that a massive abuse scandal.
Yeah.
Let's see, wrestling.
Jim Jordan. That's his name.
Jim Jordan.
Jim Jordan.
The man with two first names.
Yeah.
Jim Jordan denied he knew about sex abuse on an Ohio State wrestling team. It seems unlikely. That seems like it's a real like geez, that guy at Penn State that was like routinely abused, that everyone just sort of ignored because they wanted to was he I think he was another like assistant. He was like an offensive coordinator or something like that at Penn State, I think. There was the United States gymnast team, their team doctor was like routinely abusing girls on their gymnast team. And he did that shit for like decades. The guy at Penn State also did that shit for decades, and apparently Jim Jordan's other coach was also doing it. And like, man, we've been around enough creeps to know that shit always happens because people never seem to do the right thing and ever turn anyone in, or they just put their head in their sand and just sort of ignore this like awful shit going on, rather than accept that the person you put your trust in is massively abusing it and abusing people as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, that wonderful human being is running as well, and so you're exactly right. This is why would we want to put our the well-being of the country, of the world, in these people's hands, you know? And it's so insane to me, Dave. You look at what like and by no means do I enjoy having to side with the Dems. I don't enjoy that. It's not my cup of tea.
No, not even that. Like, because they're all, again, they're from the same class of people. They all go to the same schools. They might have a slightly
Exactly.
different ideology, you know, but they are still ideological in a way that is deeply deeply like painful to a lot of people around them. In terms of, you know, the liberal ideology is still, well, we can't give anything away for free. You know, you still got to like work for it. We have to thing to death because they honestly don't have any. They don't actually want to like help people all that much. They will still cater enterprise. They will still cater to capital, and the way that the conservative faction of our country will just sort of openly admit to. So you get this kind of speaking on both sides of your mouth because they have to nominally be that they have to like nominally be the progressive party, even though we don't really have a progressive or left wing faction in the United States at all, or at least in the States Command. There's no ideology on that side. It is all center or center right, and then it's far right. There really is no in the United States.
That's the truth, you know, and that's the unfortunate thing, right? Is oh my God, it saddens me, but of course, right? We have to align, ally with those that are at least espousing some of the tenets that we hold to be self-evident and dear, versus the other side. But you take an example, even if it's only for notoriety. Take the example of Menendez. That dude's toast. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he's corrupt for sure, but toast. You know what I mean? You didn't have toadies coming out of the woodwork to say, you know, he's just misunderstood. You know, it was like
No, those gold bars just found their way into his home. Menendez also. If you had to imagine the corruption of like a member of Congress from New Jersey, like Menendez is like one of the guys that you would imagine, or he's like, if you had to like draw it from memory, you would probably draw Bob Menendez. Because like the only reason his first corruption trial like never went anywhere is because he got off on a hung jury, right? There was like a holdout too on that jury, so it eventually was declared a mistrial, right? But you know, they raid his home, they find a bunch of gold, they find a bunch of text messages on his phone where he's like selling military secrets to Egypt and getting a
oh God.
money and gold in return. Yeah, because he was on the Armed Forces Committee or Armed Services Committee or one of those, and he was just like sending the most incriminating texts that you could think of, and whoever he was in contact with in Egypt would just be like, "All right, thumbs up, yeah," in reaction to like a deeply criminal thing that he just texted out. It's like it is so farcical. in a lot of ways. But like you're right. Like nobody's like going to the mat for Bob Menendez because he's so cartoonishly corrupt that there is no defense of it whatsoever. And the fact that he tried to defend it of just being like, look, it's racial trauma that I have to hoard all this money and gold under my floorboards and in the linings of my suits because, what if the communists come and try to take it with you after all?
What about Fidel? Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to come and
Good
pry the
God.
gold fillings of your teeth.
Way to set back our chance at getting a freaking Latinx president in the next 100 years, you fuck.
Oh, I mean, we'll probably get one, but it's probably going to be someone like Rafael Cruz, you know?
No, Dave, don't even go there, dude. That guy, such a piece of shit, dude. And you know what's, I don't like to like impugn people like that per se, but it's on the nose. There's really no other way to assess his performance. He's a toasty piece of shit, that one.
Yeah, he's someone who just looks like a liar. Like, I've also heard him described as having the face of someone who has never made a woman come,
Nice.
which I would absolutely believe.
Ugh. He's probably got a saggy old man ass.
But yeah, no, he's one of those, the band of like hyper conservative anti-communists like Cubans who have like found like political ground in the United States is worthy like an entire dissertation like in and of itself. And how it's like the shaking hands meme between like American fascism and like Cuban anti-communism.
Which is so interesting, right? Because Cuban communism, to my understanding, and you could devote your entire career life to studying and learning and all that type of stuff. The iterations that people on the right always love to point at are, Cuba, North Korea, USSR. Wait, not really USSR anymore because former KGB operative is couldn't possibly take any of the stuff that he learned while he was part of the USSR and incorporate it into fucking Russia today. But so
Right.
they take the despotic stuff that any political ideology is capable of generating.
Mhm.
Any political ideology where power is capable of being sequestered from the people towards a select few. I mean, like I said, political ideology, I would be hard pressed to find like a Jainist despot. I just don't think that would be possible if
Yeah.
you're Jainist, But they hate looking at like the Nordic countries, right? And there's something to be said. My wife is very smart. She brought this up. She goes, "Well, it's kind of a false dichotomy, though, to just say that the Nordic countries are highly successful and good right now because they're socialist." She goes, "There's a whole trajectory and a history of them not necessarily being the most multicultural, being the most, and not saying that takes away from their ability to be successful if they were to be multicultural, but to say that, when you look at them and you go, wow, they're capable of doing this for their people. Truly, how many people do they have? What issues do they have to deal with? What type of hegemony exists within the confines of their countries? How has it been affected by the fact that they were always allied to one of the greatest powers of all time in the world, whether it be Britain
Right.
or Germany or fucking, So that being said, though, I still think, and her and I have awesome discussions about this. I still think that the model is sound in the sense of they are operating socialistically, and it is of a benefit to their people.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, no one's really out there trying to fuck over a Nordic country, though, to my knowledge, at this particular point in time. You know what I mean? You don't have like Belgium invading the Jutland to like reappropriate its resources and marginalize its people like that. That didn't happen.
I'd love to see a Flemish army suddenly march on Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is one of those things where you're right. The stability that like a social democracy can present people like economically within this big integrated economic system that we have in this that we have on this planet, right? They don't get hit by recessions nearly as hard, and it's also like Norway is very oil rich, which is something that is something that really bolsters their economy. But of course, they nationalize it, so everybody in the country essentially gets a cut, and they do have a problem with things like white nationalism and really rampant racism in those countries as well, where there are immigrants who have a pretty terrible time when they try to move to a place like Sweden, and people like that Anders Breivik guy who killed like 70 kids in a mass shooting event when he went to a campground and wrote this big manifesto talking about how just like, no, I'm trying to bring the attention to like it's some sort of like immigration threat, and was just completely batshit insane.
That's the issue in the entire economic trajectory of the globe is
Yeah.
mandated and moved by capitalism, right? That you cannot have the idealized. Um, I know I just took a 90-degree turn from what you just said, Dave, but I think it flows together in that you cannot have it difficult to see the idealized state through to fruition when you have things like fear of immigration because it's going to affect you economically, because ultimately that is the greatest fear. Yeah, it's talked about the fear of culture and all that, but culture is completely and wholeheartedly tied into well-being. Well-being is completely and wholeheartedly a product of your station on the economic spectrum in this world.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate and it's sad and it requires massive critiquing, right? It's the age-old adage of like, well, they didn't know what we know now back in the day, so we can't hold it against them. And it's like, no, they knew that they wanted something, and they knew that they would do anything that it took to get what they wanted, whoever that was, to the point of genocidally wiping out people, to the point of destroying, entire biomes. Like, there was a benefit to be had in their mind, and it wasn't a philosophical benefit. It wasn't a, you know, this great awakening of like, yes, if I go and pierce the dark veil of Africa, or if I pierce the dark veil of Central and South America, I will somehow have some sort of like existential enlightenment. No, it was literally like, those motherfuckers have something that I want, and there's a bunch of dark skinned folks cruising around that are in my way, and they're either gonna fucking play ball or I'm gonna wipe them out. And that was it. Like, people made money off of it. And so fast forward to that psychopath, like you said, fear of immigration, right? You are now afraid someone is going to take away your culture, they're going to take away your well-being, but at the core of all of that, they're going to take away your ability to live a good life. And what defines living a good life in a capitalistic, modernized world is economic viability. They're going to take it away. And so you have to fight off the horde, when in all actuality, the people that provide you the space to even create quote unquote economic viability are the same people that are strangling the global south, have created a global south, and have caused mass exodus events of people just trying to survive, people just trying to live their life
Mhm.
because they want to be able to procreate, and they want to be able to fucking actually eat and breathe and drink water, for fuck's sake.
One of the things that really constantly pisses me off about political messaging is uh, that sort of xenophobic grounding of, you see headlines and shit like that about immigrants written that are just fully sort of submerged in like great replacement theory, and are putting that always like in the subtext. And you see it now when like GOP in the States sides that they want to hit at Democrats by basically saying that, oh, look at the poor people who are crossing the border and stuff like that. And they always talk about the southern border like it's this, I don't know, like it's this fucking DZ. And it's just like, it's not really that thing. Like, it's not really it's never the crisis that they say that it is. Like, there is a genuine like human rights crisis happening, but it's not the way that they're presenting it. Usually that, we have people set up in concentration camps in tent cities and stuff like that, and we're one of the wealthiest places on the globe. And it's just like, no, we have more than enough funds that we could really alleviate that crisis by giving someone a place to live, sending them to somewhere where there is work to do, set them accurately so that they can be accounted for and like put into the system. Like there are so many things that can happen, but because of this sort of like racist narrative that we have to uphold, nobody is going to take the chance on anyone who decided to make a crossing. And it's fucked up beyond belief. Like it's one of the most things. It becomes like this lightning. It also becomes like a lightning rod for like hyper conservative far right like recruitment as well, because they can just dangle great placement in front of your dumb white face, and you'll just be like, oh my god, no, it's going to happen. I might have to learn a second language. And I don't know. It's one of those things that just absolutely hurts my heart. And as like a student of history, I can't ever believe any of it because we've been saying the same shit since we were building the railroad and trying to make everyone afraid of Chinese immigrants, which is still something that continues to this day. Like we've never gotten over the quote peril that we started touting in like the mid 1800s. Like it's just such bullshit. Like if immigration was going to cause the like destruction of a society, wouldn't it have happened by now? Wouldn't it? Good God. Especially when we're a cosmopolitan, like settler colonial state.
I was just going to say, you want to talk about an example of immigration causing societal collapse. There was 32 million people that lived here between north and central, the northern part and central part of the North American continent. I want to say there was at least another 12 to 17 that lived in South America. So you had approximately the better part of 50 million people living, and they were genocidally wiped out by immigrants that are now not wanting immigrants to move around. The survivors of that original immigration from Europe. Horrible irony. It's beyond, it's mind-blowing. That this idea, because you're right, vast majority of folks here are a form of immigrant, but there's so many perspectives or lenses to look at that, because like you even look at Black America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you call Black America the offspring of an immigrant populace? Immigration
Ooh.
is a conscious act, right, with agency.
Yeah. Right.
And that there was no agency there, man. That was really fucked up. And so you have an indigenous populace that was horribly and brutally freaking expatriated from their homeland and brought over to work environments that the original indigenous populace could not be enslaved to work because they were wiped out both through warfare and germs. And
yeah,
same with indentured servitude. While they were immigrants, could you really say that was a thing of agency? That they had the option? If they would have stayed in, England or Ireland, they would have died. There was no ability for them to sustain themselves, to live. And who benefited throughout the entire time of that, right? The landholding gentry. So that you have a conglomeration of survivors of some of the most horrendous, economically driven genocidal warfare the world has ever known.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to pump a land full of starving people that we do not want in our own area. And we're going to make those starving people who are, I mean, they are dangerously close to net failure of existence. We're going to give them guns. We're going to give them hope that they might actually end up being like the landholding gentry. And those starving people are going to murk the hell out of the indigenous people. They're going to enforce the people that were enslaved. Like it's crazy, man. So I think you're right. I think there's something to be said of we all have a history, or most of us, I should say, have a history of someone was an immigrant for sure.
Right.
But more, and I think this is more to the tune of why it's so difficult to get people though to buy on board to the real issue of the dehumanization is that this country was founded, we talk about how it was founded on immigrants, right, in our US history. This country was founded on the dehumanization of humanity and the reallocation of humanity to assets towards a greater economic structure.
Yeah.
So why can't we have the southern border absolutely open up, right? Because you're going to flood the market. And if you flood the market, then the assets that you have, that's the threat. That is the threat right there, that we're going to flood the market, and then the assets that we have are going to lose their ability to bargain, or they're going to lose their ability to get a living wage. Really? Bargain in what? The unions that you're trying to disband get a living wage in what form? Like,
Yeah.
because you're absolutely right, Dave. You have people, and it's disgusting that we do not let people in freely from the southern border. There is if a person's willing to work and better their lives, why not? But there's this very interesting thing that countries do, especially Western countries, where it's like, well, we can't support them. What are you talking about? Like, literally, legitimately, what are you talking? I'm reminded of a business, let's just say, without getting into too much detail, but some of the businesses that I've interacted with, right, that talk about how it's not in the budget to do base necessities, and then you find out what their profit margin is, and then you go, the base necessities constitute approximately 0.5% of your bottom line. What are you talking about, you greedy fucks?
You have to realize that a lot of the situation, especially that is happening right now in Texas and stuff like that, and Biden recently basically kowtowed to conservative pressure, and he's going to build 20 more miles of border wall in a section of Texas, which we know it doesn't do anything. It doesn't really stop anybody. It's just a boondoggle to say that you're doing something. And what's worse is that Abbott down in Texas did that thing where he put that floating barrier in the Rio Grande, and then had a barrier armed with these skill saw blades in between the buoys, and they're putting razor wire up in sections of the desert like that, and it's just fucking awful. And it's these people also, when you talk about the voluntary nature of immigration, when choosing to come over, choosing to sign up into an indentured servitude, or sometimes getting to use the Shanghai and just brought over on a ship. A lot of these people, they're not really immigrants, they're fucking refugees. A huge percentage of the people coming over in Texas right now are Venezuelan, and it's because we fucking sanctioned their economy into the fucking dust. We largely, because they had a nominally socialist revolution, they nationalized their oil industry, we basically just starved them out, globally. And now that there's nothing that they can do, they're paying up and heading here. And it's like, yeah, maybe if we didn't want these things to happen, maybe we shouldn't work so hard to destabilize the global South in the way that we do. Because like, nobody coming across the Mexican border is actually like Mexican, really. It's a lot of Central America, South America, and like Haiti and stuff like that. And like again, these are places that we've just constantly fucked around in terms of like geopolitics and completely broken these places apart. And then act surprised, and suddenly these people show up and need help. And it's like maybe we shouldn't have gone to these extreme lengths to completely destroy them land. It's one of those things. I forgot what it's called. It's something boomerang where the violence that you export across the empire always goes back to the imperial core, and we just see that play out. Yeah, constantly, decade after decade, we just see that play out.
It makes sense that that's what would happen, right? If you fucking torpedo someone's vessel and you are the only land left.
It's frustrating. It's one of those things where it is so buoyed by like white nationalist belief and racism and stuff about like the Great Replacement, when you just say like, no, we have services. We also have an economy that basically runs on there being this under labor class of second citizens. So these people are going to come in anyway because frankly our economy basically relies on them being here, because we don't pay living wages to people that do most of the actual necessary work to keep this economy rolling, and we'll always rely on cheap immigrant labor as a result. Even if that ends up screwing the labor of everyone else who typically did that, it's like it's never really the fault of the people that do it. It's always the fault of the bosses who push that shit around, because it's they'll bring in a mass of people to strike break and stuff like that. If you have this population of people, say like Black American freedmen in the 1800s, who are suddenly have rights and demanding a living wage, you'll import Chinese labor to roads instead because they're desperate enough to take it or whatever.
Yeah. And I'm going to be 37 here pretty soon.
Yeah, that's great, man. We're knocking on the door of 40. Do you feel 40 years old or almost 40 years old?
Some days.
I was going to say, you might feel older than me. I was going to say, you have 3 kids and a difficult job, so yeah, you're probably 90 some days.
Some days, Dave. I'm reminded, speaking of jobs and all that type of stuff, I am reminded what you were describing, and it is so crazy how it plays out in certain venues, right? Like obviously it exists all over the place. I don't necessarily think maybe Google is on the same wavelength as where I'm at or where I've been, or things like that. And without implicating myself, let's just say that in my experience, agriculture has not really stepped away from everything you just described.
Oh yeah.
That horrible wages, a lack of caring about safety until it's literally like someone dies, and then maybe you do something for like a month, and it's like you were saying, Dave. I mean, and like I've said to a lot of folks, how good of a business person are you, or a country are you business wise, if you are reliant on being a huckster and shirking the well-being of someone to make your bottom line? Like if you cannot have success without marginalizing and destroying the people that work for you, are you really that good of a business person? Are you just super greedy? And every time I see some politician like sign off on a $75 billion tax break, I had a conversation with someone the other day. She's super smart. She's young. She's younger than us. Super smart, but also super conservative. And she's like, it is your right to not have to pay taxes. It is your right, you know.
I mean, maybe, but we live in we live in a society. I hate to say it, and especially the way that we've chosen to sort of structure it in nation states, which is you kind of got to pay the protection due to the Don. That's really what the tax is, and I never have much sympathy for people who complain about taxes because it's one of those things that we all pay, right? It's one of those things that we all engage in. So I can't get too upset at it. Not really.
Instead of pledging my sword and my axe and my bow, I'm pledging my freaking, 26%.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to me, right? Especially given it's like, where are we supposed to generate revenue that benefits us all? That's the big one that blows my mind. Where are we supposed to get that revenue from? Do you like
Yeah.
driving on roads?
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, yeah, and people get mad. They also, well, there's a lot of messaging that says, well, your tax dollars being spent on people who don't deserve it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge as to who these people are. You can probably guess. You can probably guess behind the. You can probably read between the lines that one. But it is also like another one of those things where, like, yeah, I'm not happy about how my tax dollar gets spent either, but for very different reasons. I'm not happy because it gets pocketed and like neoliberalism will break off public goods and then privatize them. Like that's why I don't like how it's being spent now. I don't get mad because someone might want to be on welfare. That doesn't make me mad at all. I'm fine with that. Like, go ahead. It's not really much of a life to live anyway, so I don't really care. It's just a lot of that's baked into that ideology of just like, no, you have to work and you got to grind it out. Nothing can be given to you for free because that is a moral, like, degenerate failing. And it's going to cause the entire fabric of society to like unwind if someone can actually just be happy, not working like no, or just like one of those little jobs that doesn't really matter, sit in a cubicle farm and push around spreadsheets. It's like one of those things where like there's a big difference between like actual jobs that require labor and then like an email job. Like I work an email job, which is why I do from home 3 days a week, because I just need an email address and I can do the entirety of my work. It's not real labor. It really isn't. I put work into it. But, I don't ever really create much of anything. I would say the printer that I send my work to actually print stuff out that I design does way more labor than I ever do. And the fact that it is like this big inverted pyramid as well, where I get paid very well to do not very much work. And the fact that, we grew up with kids who had to work in the fields prior to coming to school. And school started at like 7:30 in the morning. We worked with kids who almost an arm in a potato digger, when he was a child. Why is there a child on a potato digger? God, like look at that society and ask yourself if that's like a healthy or fair or equitable thing or even like morally right.
Exactly, and that's the thing, right? Is it all comes back to, I believe it was Cornel West was talking about it in one of his lectures. It all comes back to who stands to benefit, what is the gain, etc. And then I'm gonna add, how deluded or full of shit is someone willing to be? How far down the pipeline they have to be to convince themselves that they're actually decent, whether it be a country or person or a business, you know what I mean? Well, I employ a lot of people. Yeah. Do you employ a lot of people? Cool, man. Are they getting a living wage? Well, no. Oh, is their work environment safe? Well, no. Oh, okay. Are you rich? Well, yeah, but I worked hard for it. Really? How? Because I employ a lot of people. I took all the risk. You took all the risk? That's pretty wild. It's like the person said, when I brought up the Western expansion, I said, I get where you're coming from with regard to like what's yours is yours, right? Big Lebowski is one of my favorite movies of all time. John Goodman says, "What's mine is mine." But the thing of it is westward expansion, and we know this intimately because of where we're from.
Yeah.
People were allowed to homestead. The country, one of the biggest social movements of all time, socialistic things of all time, whether they like to admit it or not, is the country said, motherfuckers, you guys go out there and settle this ground, and after X amount of years, it's yours.
Yeah.
If you know that you are capable of getting something for free, now it was hard to get out here, I'll grant you that. There were people that already lived out here that didn't necessarily want you here. Interesting notion there. Especially, you know, when you take their children and throw them in residential schools, and you freaking
Yeah.
try to genocidally wipe out everybody. You know, the response that I got, Dave, was, well, you know, you had to do something though. You still had to come out here, and you had to do so. And I was
Did we?
like, the well, in order to get the benefit, right, of that
Yeah.
socialistic program. And like I said, I was like, yeah, but it was hedged. The bets were hedged. Like, yeah, westward expansion was insane. A lot of people died for sure because a lot of people were cannon fodder for the freaking landholding gentry. Who are you going to have go out and quote unquote settle the West? You're going to have the people that get wiped out in the first couple generations. Then you're going to come in and you're going to freaking kick them off the land, or you're going to buy them out for cheap. Like,
Yeah.
this idea that anybody is self-made is mind-blowing. And so I go back to what you were saying about, like, you know, the morality of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there. And it's so funny to me that, like, they get away with that. They can say they want the moral high ground of protecting a fetus, but not a breathing being. They want the moral high ground of protecting, you know, this sort of archaic chivalry regarding the sanctity of a woman's, like, discretion when it comes to using a shitter, you know, but they
Yeah.
have no problem scud missiling a freaking school. Like,
Right.
it's mind blowing, dude.
Yeah. And see a lot of it in these stories that we tell ourselves, because like one of the first things that you can do to sort of critically examine these things is like even back into our founding like myths and stuff like that. Ask yourself, is like, who benefits from this narrative? Like, who is seen as the hero? Who is seen as the villain of these stories that we tell ourselves? And it's even like one of those things that is pretty starkly even mentioned upon in even works of literature, even from like the 19th century. Like Last of the Mohicans is basically predicated entirely on people coming into the, you know, quote unquote new world and finding out that all the land was already taken up by royal charter. This is before the United States exists, right? So then they have to move further and further out into the Ohio River Valley because that is the only place where they are allowed to sort of, you know, quote unquote clan. And that brings them into direct conflict and in opposition and competition with the people who already lived there, indigenous people who were there. So when they rightfully respond to it as, you know, an incursion that is threatening their very livelihood, suddenly it's an attack and it requires reprise. And then you have this like massive genocidal campaign that goes all the way across the continent eventually. It's one of those things where, you know, you talked about how we're intimately familiar with the stories we told ourselves about settling even in places like Washington State. Like I said, you know, ask the Yakima and the Nez Perce what happened. They got violently repressed by the military in the early 19th century, and by the time the Civil War died down, a shit of people ended up moving out west and settling in the Pacific Northwest as a result. And you know, you had Chicano and like Mexican population who were already living in the West who floated further up into the into like the Columbia Basin and stuff like that. And the Spain has its own colonial history that's different, or Latin colonial history is a little different from Anglo colonial history, but not really that much different.
Lot of rapists.
Yeah, it's it had a little different view of how it wanted to classify race and how it wanted to sort of build its essentially the castes of its society off of that interpretation. You're intimately familiar with this as well, just off of your own just sort of personal history and your own sort of research into it as well. Yeah, no, it's weird. It's the constant I was to go off on a little bit of a tangent. I was listening to this big unit on Napoleon III, who's the guy who is responsible for putting Maximilian the Habsburg on the throne of the Mexican Empire. And how Benito Juarez basically put that guy up against a wall. And then, you want to talk about even like Mexican history, but like how Benito Juarez was such an aberration, even of that own Mexico's own history. That how many years did it exist as this sort of nation state before it become Republican, to having a like liberal reformer come out of Oaxaca who was like Zapotec, right? Who wasn't even Creole Spaniard or something like that. It's fucking wild.
He was an indigenous dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
He it's crazy, man. You're right. I mean, the segue or slight tangent, but yeah, their mentality, right, was the Spanish was and the Portuguese for the most part, and actually the French in a lot of ways, with the exception of like Montreal and that area. They definitely had families and women and children and stuff come in there and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, French colonialism was a little different as well. The French largely would send in missionaries before they would do anything else. They were kind of big on that kind of Catholic. The soft power expansion is going to happen through the church, and then the state's going to move in afterwards. But speaking of Napoleon III and French colonialism, Algeria, if you really want to talk about how the French, one, viewed the people of Algeria similar to, and Napoleon III was very explicit about this as well. They viewed Algerians as being like Native Americans in North America. They tried to enact the exact same kind of settler colonialism. And the thing is like, much like North America, Algeria wasn't broken. It was a stateless society that operated pretty much in lockstep with itself. If one place had a food shortage, every other place would gather up food and send it there. Like there was this really equitable sort of state way that they organized themselves, and the imposition of a European stratified class society, the imposition of a global economic structure, was what caused this massive, basically a never-ending war with Algeria that France was always mired in all the way up until like the 1960s.
That's the wild part of it, right? Like you start to learn these things that even as progressive, quote unquote, as the Republic was, then it was taken over by its freaking dictator and all that type of stuff. The prime example of how our country did not live up to what it stated its beliefs were was with regard to supporting Haiti after they ousted the French.
Oh yeah.
Like, new democracy, fledgling democracy. We're all about democracy, but they're black. Can't have none of that. Can't have any of that, because I was reading about, Dave, on a complete different note, but just back to that same stupidity. Why does Oklahoma have a panhandle? The Oklahoma has a panhandle because of the onset to stave off the Civil War. Texas could not expand beyond, I want to say it's the 38th parallel.
Right.
And so in order for Texas to maintain its slaveholding, it could not have a border, so it ceded the Panhandle to Oklahoma
Yeah.
to maintain its ability to have human chattel.
Yeah. Oh boy, Texas. Oh, book you can write on Texas about like, hey, why did the Texas Revolution happen? Why did they break away from Mexico? A bunch of Anglo settlers showed up with slaves, and slavery was illegal in Mexico. So yeah, when Santa Anna marches the army in there to enforce the abolition that his country has, and suddenly these white settlers are like, "My God, we're being attacked by Mexico. Help us!" It's just like, of course, dog, you were breaking their laws.
That's after they pledged to convert to Catholicism and learn Spanish.
Can you imagine a Spanish Catholic Anglo Texas?
Jesus. We need to call it. I think we need to call it the Interesting Times.
Okay, yeah, I'm okay with that. The Interesting Times podcast, because we live in interesting times, and I think the more that we talk about our past and the more that we kind of like reckon with our own history and stuff like that, the interesting time never stopped. They started a long time ago. It's so fun. I gotta close this Wikipedia window. When you were talking about, to go off on another tangent real quick, when you were talking about these European explorers going out and penetrating the wilderness, places like Somaliland and the Dark Continent and South America, there was a writer, Richard Francis Burton, who put this idea out there that like there's a certain latitude on the planet where suddenly everyone becomes lascivious and like a pedophile, and he called it the Sotatic Zone. And he thought that like when British people traveled abroad and they went into the Mediterranean, suddenly they just wanted to have sex with children. This was a belief that was put out there, and was guy was, this is bonkers. This is off the wall crazy. This is like geographical determinism to a degree that is like that is like absolutely insane. Like, dog, no. These people are going out there and abusing people because they don't see them as people. There are predators who are traveling abroad because there's no structure of accountability. They can get away with it. Like, that is why you are noticing this shit, my dog. And you're also just traveling to other places in the world and seeing that people have different bounds and taboos and climbs of what they consider to be deviant and what they consider not to be. But yeah, that thing just popped in my head, and I just could not remember exactly what it was called for the longest time.
Jesus.
But yeah, no, we'll call it the Interesting Times, and we'll let Sir Francis Burton just continue to rot in hell.
There's a few of them that are probably, keeping each other company.
Yeah. Oh, he was the first European to see Lake Tanganyika. Wow, very impressive.
Shit.
We could act like that's a cool thing, I guess. But yeah, man. Yeah, call it Interesting Times. We'll have to update the title card. Now it's no longer Untitled Podcast Project.
Yeah. Let's try to make it big, Dave. Let's get huge and spread the word. Let's act like
Let's try to rake in that free radio money. Watch yourself, Joe Rogan, working for you.
Oh yeah, him and the Epoch Times and Prager and all those fucks.
Oh, Prager was one of those things where like oh man, my girl got duped for like a second, where she was just like, maybe this is a good way to like maybe learn what like, and she was right. Like, it is a good way, like if you really want to understand like conservative ideology, Prager, you'll get a pretty good idea of like what these people think and how they organize the world within their own heads, right? But it is not a place to learn whatsoever. It is a place for like miseducation, like at its finest. I'm just like, well, slavery wasn't that bad, was it? Excuse me? Allow me to clutch my pearls. Good God.
There's that. There's the, it's like, what's the douchebag's name? Is it something Walsh? Is it Matt Walsh?
Oh yeah, he's a big like, I'm gonna stake my dude who describes himself as a theocratic fascist, like openly, and I don't know what that means really. I just know like why would you want to hang a label around your neck? He's one of those guys who puts like quote unquote gender ideology as like a mark of like societal decay. And again, yeah, totally nuts. Prager, the Matt Walshes of them. Yeah, no, it's boy. There's another guy, Shapiro.
Oh my god. Angry little fuck.
Yeah, a classic example of a dumb person's idea of a smart person. He got big when he was a teenager, writing like conservative screeds as like a 16 and 17-year-old. I actually listened to a unit where they read through a book about sex, sexuality, and pornography when he was like 17. And boy, there's never been there's never been a bitter virgin writing about anything in regards to like sex. But it was just hysterical. Read any Ben Shapiro media criticism when you can. The fact that we were just like, what movie did you watch when he comes down to like actually talk about like media analysis, and you realize this was clearly someone who was homeschooled and didn't get like a very broad sort of like cultural or like societal education very much. And also, it is one of those things where if your political ideology can be summarized by one in their teens, it's probably not a great political ideology. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like when they're like, here's this 9-year-old conservative who wears a tie every day to school. I'm like, that kid's a fucking nerd and deserves to be. Bring back bullying, please. Put this kid in his place. Have him learn a little something about fitting in with the society around you. And of course, I don't totally believe that, but it's just like, you probably should hit that kid and be like, can you pull for a second? And like maybe reject your parents' ideology instead of just wearing it like, around your thing. But be contrarian at least a little bit, dog.
Oh, when you're talking about that little 9-year-old, I'm like, he's got to give a sermon on Sunday, man. How else is
Oh,
he going to
sure.
be betrothed to, his teenage bride? And obviously, not everyone's like that. To the people that would be listening,
Yeah.
they're going to find out that you and I are gonna cap on people at as much as we do ourselves, as a
Right.
means of keeping levity and making people realize just the farcical hilariousness that is some of the hills that these people choose to die on. It's just
Oh,
insane.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Look at Alex Jones.
Yeah, a guy whose defense in court was, it's all just an act. Please stop suing me.
Yeah, I can't afford anymore. I can't afford anymore.
Yeah, he's someone I'm glad to see sort of like evaporate into nothingness, and largely because his own lawyers accidentally screwed him by giving away the entirety of his phone's contents to the prosecutor by accident during discovery. Uh,
Yeah.
real just
that's so
like
great.
real F tier sort of like legal. Oh man, it's like one of those things like the ongoing like lawsuits against like Trump and stuff like that is just like, only hire the best, only hire the best fabulous legal team. I got a fabulous legal team. And it's like, dog, you really don't. You're hiring yes men who make you feel and make you feel smart. I don't think Rudy Giuliani's melting head is going to help you get out of any of this stuff. Not that man practices anywhere in DC or New York anymore because he's been disbarred. But yeah, man, we're coming, we're gunning. Podcasting is praxis. We're gonna do it.
There you go. No, man, I'm down, 100% down. We have to, Dave. I mean, number one, we have fun at it. Number two, it keeps us connected. It's pretty cathartic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if anything, it's good just for coping. If anybody wants to hop in a comment and be like, I can see you dirty liberal, I would say, one, we're progressives, we're not liberals, and two, yeah, we are coping. Look at the world we live in. You gotta cope somehow.
We didn't, you know, we didn't ask for, our college education to not count for. I should say it does count because we have the educational an experiential cachet, but I mean, like economically, we didn't ask for it to be where it is today. We didn't ask for a planet that is dying off currently. We didn't ask for any of that shit. We were dreamers. We were dreamers like our parents raised us to be, and we were lied to fucking massively by not necessarily our parents, but the bullshit mechanisms that we found ourselves coming up in. Like,
Yeah.
just get an education. Everything's fine. Everything will be fine. Don't worry about it.
The ship will correct itself. Yeah, no, just like dog, if and one of those things where like a lot of people are noticing the pains, they're noticing the shortcomings in society, but they are coming to the wrong conclusions as to why. Right. They're sitting there being like, wait, why am I working myself to death when I was told I should be able to have a pretty comfortable living with the path I have taken in life? And it's because like, well, you're getting raked over the coals by capital, by consolidation, by monopoly, by a large and different like organizational and governmental system that doesn't care about you and sees you mostly as like a serial number and like a little instead because you are part of the labor class whether you like it or not. And it's just like it's not and it's not the fault of queer people or immigrants. It's not, you have to be smarter than that. You know, it's one of those things where I think about, you know, there's lots of free thinkers these days, not very many deep thinkers or critical thinkers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of freedom going around. Yeah, for sure.
Like, sure, yeah, like you can think whatever you want, man, but like have some criticality, have some depth. Maybe follow these ideas out their law conclusions. Maybe, I don't know, read a book. that could also help. And also, like, don't even just like read nonfiction. Read a goddamn fiction book once in a while too. Like, you'd be surprised the amount of my whole social awakening came through works of fiction more than it did reading political manifestos and stuff like that, right? Like, I just had to read black American author after black American author after American author writing about what it is like to be black in America before it finally dawns on me, huh? I'm starting to think maybe they're getting a bum rap. You know what I mean? So it's
Oh yeah,
like, you know, read a fiction book and have some criticality in your life.
I agree.
Let's call this episode good. I'm gonna try to edit it today. Do you got tomorrow off?
No, I go back in tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, God. So many of the
that's
people that I know and like and all that are. There's absolutely no way that they would give us Indigenous Day off, let alone Columbus Day. Or I should say Columbus Day off, let alone Indigenous Day. But I
yeah,
wish that'd be dope.
yeah. No, one of the benefits of being a contractor is we get to follow a big federal holiday schedule, so we happen to get that off. Sorry, I didn't interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're good, Dave. That's great that you get the day off. I remember we had a guy that was like talking about how at his old job before he came over, he's a salesman. He's like, yeah, we used to get Good Friday. We used to get Good Friday off, but they took that away, and then they gave us something called Juneteenth. What's that? And I'm like, an actual holiday to celebrate actual things that happened to actual people in recent history.
Yeah,
Like, no hating on Jesus, but I'm pretty sure he would not have an issue with not celebrating Good Friday and celebrating, when people were released from bondage. I mean that.
yeah. The late liberation from slavery because stupid Texas was just like, but we still have a harvest. We're not going to let you be free yet. And we had to literally sail a battleship into Galveston, Texas to be like, they're free, they say as they level the guns toward the docks. Let them go.
Yeah,
Also, it's also really weird that we took a really localized sort of Texas celebration and somehow turned it into in Washington, D.C. They have Emancipation Day off. Like they have a day about the formal declaration of slavery, illegal, and like kids don't have to go to school on that. And I was working at the coffee shop at that time, and my boss, who grew up in D.C., she was a woman who in D.C. was just like, yeah, it's Emancipation Day. I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea what she was talking about because there was like tons of kids out in the streets and stuff. And it's just like, yeah, they get the abolition of slavery day off, and we could make that additional holiday as well. But as this weird sort of olive branch that tried to be offered during the unrest of 2020. Juneteenth was the label that got attached to it, and I know a lot of like black folk from Texas who live in this area and work in this area too, who are very confused by that because they celebrated that down in Texas, and then to see it sort of banned about it nationally without like context is kind of a strange thing. It's not an entirely unwelcome thing, but it is just like there's probably a better way to do that can completely contextualize the reality. And then also it is funny seeing white people confused by words like Juneteenth.
For sure. The read that I got from it, at least in our neck of the woods, on that and why, is because it was the last holdout. So while there was an Emancipation Day, right, these people that were down there were still held in bondage. And so as like almost a solidarity to celebrate the actual freedom of people, that was the last holdout, and why it's almost like a solidarity thing of like, yeah, there's an Emancipation Day, at least from the people that I've seen up here and talked to. But the Juneteenth was when everybody, at least on the books, because Lord knows that Jim Crow freaking took over after all that. Jesus.
Yeah. Deconstruction after the Reconstruction period, stuff like that. Oh, but that's another conversation for another thing. Yeah, I think we should call it today. God, we've been talking for a good. I'm gonna try to edit this tonight. I'm gonna let you and your unfortunately plague-ridden family convalesce. Hopefully you guys feel a little better. And God, I never will. I knew when I was teaching that schools were places where you could pick up every kind of bug known to man and just end up bringing them home. But geez Louise, the amount of times when anytime I pick up a phone to you, and it's one of the three kids is sick, or your wife is sick because she's a teacher, or you're sick because it went around, and it never happens right away. You said you were good for like 2 weeks before it finally bit you. Jeez Louise. But yeah, man, hopefully you guys feel better. And you guys can knock thing out. But
thank you very much, Dave. Yeah. Our love to you and Will, sir.
Absolutely, man. Love you guys. Love you. And yeah, let's sit down next week and do this thing again. There's bound to be something else to talk about. Maybe we can talk about, go on some sort of papist rant about how we should have Good Friday back. And actually, there's some places that float holidays where it's just like if you're like Jewish and want to take like a high holiday off or something like that. A lot of businesses out here have just fleeting vacation days that you can sort of trigger whenever you want, and still get paid for them and stuff like that. But all right, I'm gonna let you go and tend to your family, tend to your garden as God wanted you to, Benjamin.
All right, W. You have a good rest of your day.
I will, man. All right, man. I will talk to you later.
All right, man.